Welcome to Fortune Forecast. I am Daisy, your hostess, and you are in my book playlist. We are going through the book titled The Psychic Life of Jesus by the Reverend G. Morris Eliot, published in 1938 by the Spiritualist Press. If you're ready to move on to the next chapter, please do go ahead and hit the description. There's a link there that will get you started. Otherwise, you can stick around for my narrator's comments. I found this title very intriguing, The Psychic Life of Jesus. And before moving forward, I'd like to share that these are my opinions that I'm sharing here. Please take no offense if you're from a specific religion or no religion. I am here exploring and bringing this to the channel. A while back, I had a conversation with my husband about the wonders and the miracles and the angels and God's voice sounding from the heaven. And it's like, why don't we hear more of that in today's time? I must say that Reverend Eliot answered that question in his preface. And he states that when the church became established, the signs and wonders ceased to be performed, and that the church, while professing to believe in Jesus, does not heal the sick. Yet, Jesus came here to reveal God to man and man to himself. It's almost as if there was a veil as we had forgotten it. It's almost that story of, how things get washed out from one generation to the other. We lose recipes, we lose ways of doing things, we lose knowledge. And he came to awaken that back up. And he said he came here to teach men that they could be as he and do greater works than he did. And truth be told, we do amazing things. What could be a miracle today, tomorrow is an easy explanation. I mean, think about it. We listen to the dead. Yes, we do. Every time we play a CD or get on YouTube and listen to Elvis, we're still listening to their voice. And if you would have said that many, many years ago, yes, you're going to be able to listen to the dead, put it that way, it's like, of course, it sounds incredible. It almost sounds, oh, that would be a miracle. But it happens today. And how many people are not given the breath of life? Whether they're nurses or doctors or paramedics. But today it's an everyday occurrence when people are brought back to life after being gone for a couple minutes. We take that for granted. And then there's those odd things where you say, well, let me make a left instead of a right, and then you look behind the rearview mirror and then there's an accident. I don't know what to tell you, but that there is something greater. And by all definition, the word psychic means relating to faculties that are apparently inexplicable by natural laws. And in all fairness, it's inexplicable today because possibly the science has not caught up to allowing us the opportunity to understand how the natural laws work. But one thing I can say, that there is one great element that Jesus taught, and it is love. I say this because I've had a near-death experience. That was the message I received by what I felt was an encounter with God, and the answer was that we need to love, and we need to be love, and we need to express love, and we need to do things in love. And funny, going back to that part of miracles, if I'm not mistaken, in Buddhism and Hinduism, miracles is a part of everyday life. It is nothing to be explained. It's something that is accepted as a normal thing. I like how the author is setting the stage here, kind of letting us know the mindset of the people of that time, how miracles were also a part of life. Having God open up the clouds and speak, or angels descend and speak, was just another day. And where have we gone? How far have we gone from that? Thinking that it is not normal. It's interesting. I'd like to continue reading to see where else this author's going to take us. in understanding the psychic life of Jesus. As I turn the page to chapter 3, Jesus possessed, among other psychic gifts, the gifts of clairvoyance and prevision. These gave him immediate insight into the characters of men. He evidently saw their auras and the effect that their thoughts had upon the ether around them. The first time Jesus met Peter, he gazed at him. The usual translation, he looked upon him, is much too weak. The Greek word means a long, steadfast, and contemplative look. It means that Jesus brought his psychic faculties into play that he might really know Peter. And he said to him, "Your name is Simon. You shall be called Cephas." Cephas was the Aramaic equivalent of the Greek Petros, which means a piece of rock. The rugged strength of Simon's character had been psychically revealed to Jesus, and he conferred upon him the symbolic name Peter, rock. Later, Jesus gazed at another man, and his psychic vision revealed so much good in the man that he had at once said to him, "Follow me." And Philip did so. And surely Philip was himself psychic and had, in some measure, gazed at Jesus and seen what manner of man he was. Otherwise, how are we to explain his immediate response to so sudden an invitation? It is more than probable that each of the 12 apostles was chosen chiefly on account of the psychic faculties he possessed. Philip told his friend Nathanael about Jesus. Nathanael doubted his friend's judgment. He could not believe that a prophet, let alone the Messiah, could come out so God-forsaken place as the obscure village of Nazareth. So Philip suggested that Nathanael should have a personal interview with Jesus. Seeing him coming towards him, Jesus exclaimed, "Behold, an Israelite in whom is no guile." How could Jesus have known that, apart from the exercise of his psychic faculty? Nathanael was amazed and said, "You know nothing about me. When have you ever seen me?" Jesus told him that he had seen him when he was in quiet meditation under the fig tree and had read his heart. This convinced Nathanael that Jesus was at least a prophet. Jesus then said, "All who follow me will one day see heaven open wide and God's messengers ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." What could Jesus have meant by those words? They come from Jacob's vision. Surely he meant that all who truly followed him would see constantly what Jacob saw once. This is what the New Commentary says. The promise of the open heaven and the vision of angels recalls the opening of heaven at his baptism and the ministry of angels during the temptation, so the thought is partly, "You shall see what it has been given me to see." Exactly. And if we couple with these words the saying of Jesus, "He that believeth on me, the works that I do, shall he do also, and greater works," we shall begin to understand his message. Jesus came to reveal to man the God powers that are inherent in him. That is one of the reasons why he chose to call himself the Son of Man. Not many days after the calling or choosing of Peter, Philip, and Nathanael, Jesus went up to Jerusalem to the Passover. On arriving at the temple, he saw, to his horror and disgust, cattle trampling over the temple court, and cattle dealers and money changers seated inside the temple. Making a whip of cords, he drove them all out, scattered the coins on the brokers, and upset their tables, crying, "Away with these! Make not my Father's house a house of merchandise and a den of thieves." How he reminds us of the Old Testament prophets. The temple authorities were too frightened and dumbfounded to resist him. The might of his indignation raised his psychic power to irresistible dominance and subdued them all. But they hated his interference and hated him. He had dared publicly to expose the priests. They never forgave him. By his courageous action, he had signed his death warrant. The Jews then accosted him with the words, "What sign of authority can you show for your abominable action?" Jesus replied, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." He was referring to the temple of his own body. But the reply was meaningless to Jewish priests who knew, but had forgotten, the psychic powers of the Old Testament seers and the prevision of the prophets. They took his words in their literal sense and ridiculed his statement. One can quite understand their doing so. And some of our modern critics have misunderstood Jesus. They have said that Jesus must have had in view the destruction of the temple and the rise of the Christian church. That is because they do not believe in the resurrection. But they are plainly told that Jesus spake of the temple of his own body. In any case, the rise of the Christian church did not follow the destruction of the temple. It preceded it. Jesus meant what he said. He had prevision of dying at the hands of the Jews and rising on the 3rd day. During the 7 days celebration of the Passover, Jesus performed a number of signs. The Authorized Version says miracles, but the Greek word does not mean miracles. It means signs and nothing else. And many believed that he was the Messiah, beholding the signs which he did. We observe that signs accompanied the birth of Jesus, his baptism, his temptation. And as soon as he began his public ministry, signs accompanied it. Yet some of our modern commentators insist that Jesus disliked working signs. They are wrong. It is true that he refused to work useless and spectacular signs, but he gloried in the signs he performed. And when his disciples told him that even the devils were subject to them, he rejoiced and said, "Yes, I have been watching Satan fall from heaven like a flash of lightning." Now, in order to understand why Jesus gloried in performing signs and in seeing his disciples causing the downfall of the satanic kingdom by expelling satanic entities, we must bear in mind certain facts. In the Old Testament, the Messianic kingdom is conceived of not only as a reign of goodness and righteousness, but as a time when demon possession, disease, premature death, and every kind of evil will be overcome and abolished. Jesus knew that at his baptism he had been endowed with the spirit and psychic powers, and it was only natural that he should rejoice in his signs as evidence that God was working through him. He knew that every time a demon was cast out, it was a sign that Satan was falling from heaven. Example was being cast out of the heaven of health, happiness, and life. So he gloried in healing all who came to him, and he commissioned his disciples to heal all who were sick. And when the disciples failed to heal in any particular case, Jesus assumed that either they or the sick or either friends lacked faith. So far from Jesus disliking to work signs, as the critics say he did, it was his mission to do so. His signs were the sign of the coming of, or presence of, the Messianic, the Christian kingdom. Without the possession of psychic gifts and the exercise of them, Jesus could not have done what he was called to do. Indeed, we should not have heard much about him, and there would have been no Christian church and no New Testament. When John the Baptist was in prison, news reached him of the signs and wonders being performed by Jesus, and he sent messengers to inquire of him, "Art thou the Messiah, or look we for another?" Jesus answered, "Tell John what you yourselves have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good tidings preached to them." Jesus knew that John would understand that these demonstrations of his psychic powers were the hallmarks of his messiahship. They were an essential part of the gospel. The early church regarded them as works and manifestations of the Spirit. They were not, as traditionalists would have us believe, proofs that Jesus was the second person of the Trinity. They had nothing to do with any metaphysical status of Jesus. He was no heavenly bellman ringing his miracle bell to call attention to his Godhead. He was rather the great lover of God and of men, and his love increased and directed the use of his amazing psychic gifts. His signs were an essential part of his message. They were not seals attached to the document. The church is obsessed with the idea that the work of Jesus was to bear the sin of mankind and offer to God an atonement for sin. But Jesus never mentioned the abstract noun sin. But he mentioned evil and spent his time in destroying the works of the devil, sickness and disease, demon possession, blindness, etc. And he bade his followers heal the sick and cast out demons. He did not, of course, treat lightly wrongdoing. Neither did he go about telling people they were sinners. He preferred to give them the parable of the prodigal son. End of chapter 3. If you haven't done so yet, hit that like button. Stay here as I now will move on to chapter 4. Jesus and his disciples came to Jacob's well. Jesus, exhausted by the journey, sat down by the well while his disciples went to the town to buy some food. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus spoke to her. In the course of conversation, he told her that she had had 5 husbands and was now living with a man who was not her husband. How could Jesus have known that, apart from the exercise of his psychic gifts of clairvoyance or clairaudience, perhaps both? The traditionalists would answer, Jesus was God and therefore knew everything. But such an answer does not in the least satisfy the modern mind. The traditionalists would also maintain that because Jesus was God, he could do everything. It is all very childish and hardly worth noticing. But we may as well note in passing that Jesus could not do everything. He could not prevent himself from being wearied with the journey, nor presumably from being hungry and thirsty. He was essentially a human being, whatever may have been his exact spiritual status on the other side. It was by the exercise of his psychic gifts that he knew the woman's past and present, and caused her to say to her friends, "Come see a man who told me all things that ever I did." 2 days later, Jesus returned to Galilee and came to Cana, where he had recently turned the water at the feast into wine. In the evening, a nobleman who had hurried from Capernaum 20 miles away came to see Jesus. "My son is at the point of death," he said. "Do come down and heal him." Jesus was, of course, willing to do what he could. He could not do mighty works where there was unbelief. And wishing to test the nobleman's faith, he said to him, "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not. I suppose I believe." The poor father did not understand, but showed his complete trust in the power of Jesus by repeating his request with even more pathos than before. "Sir, do come quickly before my boy is dead." Jesus then said, "Go back home. Your son is getting better." And at that very hour, the boy began to recover. Whatever powers Jesus possessed, I cannot help feeling that the faith of the nobleman contributed something towards the recovery of his son. Those who have outgrown the belief that Jesus was God in the orthodox sense, and have outgrown belief in miracles and are ignorant of the facts of psychic science, are at their wits' and to explain how it is possible for even a most righteous person to heal another at a distance of 20 miles. Spiritualists, however, are so well acquainted with the facts of psychic science that this supernormal cure in no way surprised them. They know that what is called absent treatment is constantly given by spiritualist healers. They know that sometimes the healer in his etheric body travels to the bedside of the patient and gives treatment to the etheric body of the patient. They know that most spiritualist healers are in close touch with their spirit guides, who are often doctors, surgeons, and osteopaths. They know that these spirit helpers possess extraordinary power, and that this power plus the psychic power of the healer can and does effect amazingly wonderful cures. They also know that thoughts are forces, and that love, faith, trust, and hope generate and transmit psychic power. And they can well believe that Jesus, who possessed a vast reservoir of love, faith, and hope, and had a plenitude of psychic gifts, and was in closest touch with the spirit world, could heal a sick boy 20 miles away. What is wrongly called a miracle is simply an unclassified phenomenon. And I doubt whether there is a single sign or wonder done by Jesus which has not been classified by psychic science. He told us that we should do the works that he did, if we had faith. Spiritualists are having faith, i.e., active belief, and they are doing the works that the Master did. I know that this will sound almost, if not quite, blasphemous to the Orthodox believer. That is because he knows little or nothing of biblical criticism and less of the signs and wonders of psychic science. It never seems to occur to the Orthodox believer that if he is not doing the works that Jesus did, it shows one of two things. Either he has no faith, or Jesus was wrong in what he said. The fact is that the modern mind can only believe in the signs and wonders performed by Jesus because similar signs and wonders are being performed today. We will now watch Jesus at work in and around Capernaum, where he made his home. His mission was to heal the sick, and Capernaum was near some famous medicinal springs, which drew crowds of sufferers in June and July. The multitudes of the sick who came to Jesus for healing were invalids drawn from all quarters to these medicinal springs. That was one of the reasons why Jesus chose to live at Capernaum. Another reason was that Capernaum was the most important and prosperous town along the Lake of Galilee. One Sabbath morning, Jesus went to the service at Capernaum and preached a sermon in which he made his first public declaration in Galilee concerning his mission. Before the sermon was finished, there was a wild disturbance. A man in the congregation who had a dual personality, his own and that of an evil spirit which controlled him, shrieked out, "Jesus of Nazareth, what have we to do with you? You have come to destroy us. You are God's anointed one." The evil spirit, being a spirit, would have seen the real Jesus rather than the physical body he was wearing. Jesus rebuked the evil spirit with the words, "Be silent and come out of him." The poor sufferer cried out as if he were being torn asunder, and the unclean spirit departed from him. One biblical scholar who has written A Life of Christ informs us that this poor man had been suffering from a mental disease and fancied he was possessed by an evil spirit. He adds, however, "We call these complaints now insanity, but our doctors do not understand them and are not able to cure them." Who calls these complaints insanity? The Orthodox believers. Orthodox unbelievers would be the more correct term, who are ignorant of all that the word spiritualism stands for. Such persons, who would claim to be spiritually minded, are enveloped in materialism, though they are totally unaware of it. They have no idea that the spiritual world is a world of spirits, and that the two worlds interpenetrate. They visualize a three-storied universe, heaven, earth, and hell, each being a separate compartment. The dead must not be disturbed. The angels are around the throne of God. The evil spirits are in hell. The idea that angels and evil spirits have any contact with us is foreign to their thinking. When a messenger of God, a guide, insinuates a helpful thought into their minds, they exclaim, "A bright idea has just come to me," and are comforted by the thought that their minds are brighter than they thought they were. Perhaps if the bright idea is of a saving, solving nature, they may exclaim, "Thank God I have found the solution. Thank God for the power of the great I rather than for the ministry of angels." They are essentially materialistic in their religious outlook. Spiritualists are spiritualistic in their religious outlook because they know from experience that the two worlds interpenetrate. They live, as the Master and all the prophets lived, in two worlds at once. That is why a book, such as the Bible, interests them so. It speaks their language. And because they are themselves constantly casting out evil spirits, they have no difficulty whatever in believing that Jesus did so. After having cast out the evil spirit from the man, Jesus went straight to the house of Peter, whose wife's mother was laid up with a severe attack of fever. Jesus stood over her and rebuked the fever, and it left her immediately. How is it possible to rebuke a fever? We can rebuke a person, but a fever is not an intelligent being. Now, this is all very interesting. Jesus regarded disease as due to satanic agency. He once saw a woman who for 18 years had suffered from a spirit of infirmity, i.e., infirmity from an evil spirit. That is the meaning of the Greek. And he said, "This woman bound by Satan these 18 years. On another occasion, he saw a dumb man, and he cast out the devil, which was dumb. In both cases, an evil spirit had attached itself to the sufferer. Spiritualists are well aware of this phenomenon. But to return to the fever and the rebuke. It is quite clear that Jesus ascribed the fever to the agency of Satan, and that he rebuked the spirit which was causing the fever. Today, our doctors use medicine to cure fever, and I am not unprepared for the discovery that medicine may, given time, cause a spirit to detach itself from its victim, whereas psychic power can cause an immediate detachment. Spiritualists, knowing what they do of spirit, attachment, and spirit possession, are on the side of Jesus, the greatest spiritualist of us all. End of chapter. Meet me at the next video for continued reading of The Psychic Life of Jesus.